Good to hear your voice.
Welcome back to the Edge television broadcast, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, if you heard my ranting points, you may not even want to be on the program. You may not want to be associated with that thing. The good news is, Carl, that your interview will be extracted, and that's the only thing people will see, unless they take a peek at my Facebook where I might post that thing. Because anytime I get a chance to blow up Facebook, I'll do it. Speaking of blowing things up, Carl, Burning Man and things like that. They're always out there blowing things up. But before we get started, Carl, I gave a brief synopsis of you there, reading from our own bio. A researcher, writer, communicator, talking about a paradigm shift sweeping the Western world. What intrigues you about the changes going on?
Well, I've been involved in this type of research since the early 1990s. And already back then, Daniel, I could see certain writings on the wall that said we were going into a time of a transition. Back then, I was really more interested in trying to understand a couple of movements that I had rubbed shoulders with that I needed to know more about. But it intrigued me enough that by the mid-1990s, I was looking at the political, the social, the spiritual side of it. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And so there was already things happening back then, as you are well aware of, that already kind of set the tone that said that in the near future, and already it was happening, we'll be seeing a transition. We'd be moving out of a Christian sense of values. Mm-hmm. We'd be moving away from what we would understand to be civilization and the norms that we understand them to be into something that was brand new. We were moving away, even from postmodernism back then. We were starting to kind of edge towards something else. And you could call it a new paganism, or, I use the term oneness. We're moving into an era of oneness. And however that's going to look, I'm concerned about what that all entails and how that ends up feeding into politics, into social issues, particularly how it's going to impact the Christian world, because I'm a Christian, and that's the perspective I bring with it. So that's kind of my position, or my starting point.
Well, I would agree that it seems like at least this country, and I would suppose the world too, there is a transition going on. It's and they're little skirmishes. It's almost kind of like a war. It's not full on per se, except for major blowups that you see in maybe the football players kneeling, or riots in the streets here or there, maybe even mass shootings for that matter, or the subjugation of the entire continent of Europe with immigrants from the Islam, the land of the Arab lands. But with those things, though, is there underlying changes that are going on that we see that are fomenting or provoking these sort of skirmishes, these pustules popping up here and there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There definitely is a clash. There's a clash between the biblical worldview that says, and by the way, and you know this, you understand this. The biblical worldview is what formed Western civilization. It's what has given us a sense of our laws, our ethics, our moral framework. It gave us the ideas of political liberty, personal liberty. On it goes. The Western world has been completely enriched because of the Christian worldview. That is in direct conflict with what you would call maybe the new pagan worldview, which really is an old worldview, Daniel. And it says that man, God, and nature are all essentially the same. They're all intrinsically one. They share the same essence. And so those are two massive paradigms that are in collision. And those collision points are going to just erupt right across the social landscape. And you're seeing it. You're seeing it in terms of what is the meaning of the family, gender issues. You're seeing it in how we think of politics, whether we need to have a larger government involvement or lesser government involvement. You're seeing it in the complete change of the Western world. And one good example is just even simply going to the bookstore, and this is something I noticed right back in the mid to late 1990s. When you would go into the bookstores, you would find like a small rack of books on, let's say, the New Age movement or occultic studies, that type of thing. Be small. But by the end of the 1990s, into the beginnings of the year 2000s, there was walls of these books, walls, and everything was kind of moving towards that. Even books that weren't at all, genres that shouldn't have been engaged in that were. Everything kind of seemed to go down that path. And so you could see something as simple as the change of what people were reading, what your neighbors were reading, what your family was reading, and what became kind of the hot subjects or the hot books, like paranormal romance for teens, and a whole slew of books and subjects that we would understand to have a pagan background. And so you've got all these fault lines erupting right across the board of civilization.
That is true, and I just noticed that. I sent you a link today, and what was the topic is that millennials are turning to paganism. Really, just exactly where you are. So that puts you really, Carl, on the cutting edge of the investigation of this thing. And I think from a Christian worldview, those in the Christian genre need to understand what's going on out there. And I would think there needs to be some, I don't know if defense or offense or getting along or I'm not sure how would one approach this tsunami of paganism that does seem to be sweeping an entire generation coming up.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that that's actually happening. Too many people have their heads in the sand. We still have our heads in the sand. So many people don't realize the changes that have come upon our society. Everybody's asking why. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? You go to the coffee shop and talk to people, and people are always wondering, how did this happen? We've been asking this question for a long time already, and the problem is we haven't been willing to accept the fact that these changes are really religious and spiritual, philosophical in nature. And we need to, first of all, understand where these changes come from, how they happened, and then how they're manifesting right in your neighborhood, right in your family, right in your community, right in your classrooms. Because really the school has been a powerful influencer when it comes to some of these worldviews. In fact, Daniel, my very first international type event I attended was back in 1997 in Vancouver, British Columbia, at a youth-based conference looking to restructure Canada's education system to adopt this oneness paradigm, this oneness idea. It was called the Global Citizenship 2000 Youth Congress. And we had a very high-ranking United Nations official by the name of Robert Mueller with his World Core curriculum. He had come. He was selling it to the schools. He was selling it to educators. He was selling it to students. And I mean, this is back in 97. And so for myself, I was there as a fly on the wall, watching, listening, and I was going, if they get the mind, if they capture the minds of our youth, they're going to they're going to basically hold tomorrow in their hands.
Well, there's not much capture in there today's youth, as far as I can tell. Most of them got their mouths like dropping down like dopers. So and I also read something else come across this week in the news. It said that millennials, like 85%, would rather text somebody than actually talk to them. So they're completely going to an introvert type situation. At the same time, they're turning to paganism. And I tell you what, man, when I get older, because I'm just a man of my youth, about 20 something, if I ended up in a nursing home or something, got some of these freaks running the thing, they're just liable to pull the plug on me, man, and laugh about it, and then maybe Facebook Live it or something.
Well, we're in an age when we have to start asking the question, and this is going to become a real argument, a real point of concern, especially in the next, actually right now, but going on in the next 5-10 years. We're going to be having to ask the question, what does it even mean to be human? Because, we're in a point in time when euthanasia becomes the question, transhumanism, eugenics, the list goes on and these are massive. These are massive questions that are being posed. What does it mean to be human? Where does human value even come from? Because if it doesn't come from our God and our Creator, where does it come from? From society? Whip-de-doo. That means nothing. Does it come from the state? Does it come from the things we create, our own technology? Is that what's going to determine our value? Where does value come from? And so we're going to start having to ask these questions, and we're going to have to start standing up and asking these questions in a really kind of really pointed way. Where do human values come from if they don't come from God, our Creator?
Let's address that question. That's interesting that you posed there. What does it mean to be a human, Carl?
Well, from a biblical point of view, it means we were created in His image. Doesn't mean we're going to be a bunch of little gods. Doesn't mean that we equal our Creator. The creation, the art, never equals the artist or the creator. But what it does mean is that we have value that goes beyond what mankind prescribes. We have a value that is higher than the animal world. We have value that is higher than what the state says or what the masses say. We certainly have value higher than what our crowd-based artificial intelligence says. We have a value that is eternal, a value that is deeply rooted in the very character of what it means to be human. And we take that away. We take that away, and it's wide open. The game is wide open. And that's what we're seeing happening. We're seeing all kinds of things being rewritten because the game is wide open. We refuse to recognize that fundamental value of who created us and what that means.
Concerning the whole Burning Man phenomena, which of course is not just out in the West, it's a sort of a worldwide phenomena that appears to be growing. People are latching onto that thing. And you were there. Is the idea of creating and there's more than say a man now that's been added. But I guess maybe the first or the biggest was the Burning Man. There's other things now that are getting burnt, but to create a sculpture of a man and then to set him on fire, what are they saying with that?
There's a lot of reasons why people go to Burning Man. One of the things they're saying, though, through the event and the event itself, not necessarily the burn, but the event in its totality, they're asking the questions: where is our meaning? Where is our purpose? How do we come together as humanity? How do we celebrate? What is it that we're celebrating? People go to Burning Man for different reasons. And this is one of the reasons I'm glad I went, because you see, when you're on the ground, you're seeing it as it is. You're not following necessarily the clickbait articles that float all over social media, but you're actually there looking, observing, asking questions. And you realize that there's a ton of people going just for the party, just to go and kind of get out of their skin. Most people are probably going just for that reason. There's a lot of people going for the sexual adventurism because that's there. You can't ignore that.
What's going on over there?
The sexual aspect. There's people coming just for the sexual aspect. So you have people coming, let's say, for the orgy dome, which was only a couple of blocks away from my camp. You have those kinds of people coming. Then you also have the tech sector. You've got social engineers. You've got the futurists. You've got the people who see this as being something that is potentially changing the course of culture and society. And they recognize that this is the sharp edge of the cultural spear. And that's really important. That's a really important group to kind of start rubbing shoulders with. And that's one of the main reasons I went. I wanted to find out where do these people see Burning Man going? And there's a lot of talk of liquid democracy, a lot of talk of integrating the ideas of Burning Man with digital currencies, and then spreading this into a much larger into a much larger worldview. But it's important for your listeners to understand Burning Man is just one event of many, many, many events. There's about 80 regional burns that take place around the world, and then there's hundreds of offshoot events that have you could call it some influence from the Burning Man. Even today, right now, in the virtual world of Second Life, there is the only one and only officially sanctified regional virtual burn of Burning Man taking place in the virtual world of Second Life. So it's even in the virtual sphere. And what they're seeing is, and what they're saying is, we're looking for a new way of finding purpose and meaning. We're celebrating our oneness. We're celebrating this experience that we're all having in the desert or whatever festival you're going to. We're experiencing that oneness together. And therefore, because we feel it, it has to be true.
From the idea of all those people going out there to the desert and the orgy dome, as you called it, this sort of reminds me of in the Old Testament where it says, well, Moses went up to the mount, and then when he came down, the children of Israel were engaged in a massive orgy with bulls and stuff like that. I mean, is it just humans are going back to where they were?
I think in many ways we are. In fact, as I've kind of watched and rubbed shoulders with the pagan community, one of the things that keeps cropping up is I hear phrases like we're looking for an ancient future worldview. We're looking to take those ancient religious, spiritual beliefs, shamanism, going back to what's called the plant spirits. We want to go back to the ancient ways, and we want to integrate that now, change it up, mash it up, make it appealing for today's culture, and project that onto our society now and into the future. And so that element is there. Doesn't mean everybody who goes is looking for that they're doing that, but that element of this ancient type of spirituality, this experiential spirituality, there's a resurrection of it. We're kind of in a renaissance of pagan, pagan worldviews and pagan ideas.
Is there power in that, where somebody say worships a Burning Man, or maybe even, I don't know about the orgy part, but the incantations that they do they manifest things there, or is it just fun and games?
Well, I never saw things quite like that at Burning Man. Burning Man is more of a carnival atmosphere. This spring, I was at a large pagan conference that was pagan as in capital P, the religious side of paganism. You could call Burning Man small p. It adopts the pagan worldview, and yes, there's Wiccans, and yes, there is the religious side of the pagan world there. But most people who go to Burning Man are your neighbors, your coworkers, your family, the people that you meet on the street. Whereas this spring, when I went to Paganicon, which was in Minneapolis, a gathering of about 600 Wiccans, there was a lot of talk of manifestation and how the deities, the ancient deities, are now manifesting to them physically and beginning to demand that they have temples and sacred spaces rebuilt for them so that they could become more dominant within the culture and within society, so that they could put a heavier footprint within the Western world. And so it was for myself, kind of the fly on the wall, the one Christian guy in a gathering of 600 Wiccans, Druids, and heathens. It was really interesting listening as they were talking about which gods and goddesses from the ancient worlds were now in communication with them and saying, we need our temples, we need our priesthoods, we need to reinstate that old pagan way.
Well, I'd be telling them to get the hell out of here. But Carl, man, how do you protect yourself surrounded by a bunch of pagan witches and Wiccans?
Well, number one, you recognize that they're just people. I mean, they're your neighbors. They are. They're the people who you interact with all the time. We're not afraid of them, are we? Why should we be? Here's the other thing that I come at it, again, from a Christian point of view. I know that the God that I bend my knee to in love, eventually everything will bend their knee, and everyone will bend their knee to as well. And so why should I be concerned? Concerned, yes, but why should I be worried? I may be uncomfortable. Don't get me wrong, Daniel. It's not always a comfortable place to be. That's for sure. But it's not an issue where you have to be worried that all of a sudden something's going to jump out at you. You realize that, number one, this is where you're meant to be. I mean, that's my job. I understand my calling. I understand that this is where I'm meant to be. So I've been to 30, 35 different international events, or events of some importance, either from a religious, political, or technological point of view. But I've been to lots of different things. And so the pagan one I went to this spring, it was pretty spiritually charged. It was pretty wild as you listened to these witches discuss, how all this kind of works, and the hair goes up in the back of your neck as you realize the seriousness of what you're actually witnessing. Whereas Burning Man, that element wasn't really there. It was more almost a sense of well, number one, a sense of wow, this is 70,000 people coming, right. and the sense of this is 70,000 people who are not hippies. That's often been the kind of the language being used, a bunch of hippies out in the desert. No. What strikes you is These are people that you would run into wherever you may find yourself, right in your neighborhood. And I've given a number of different talks already on Burning Man since I came back. In fact, I did some here. I did a talk just last weekend in Oklahoma. And when it was all done, I had a guy come up to me and said, when you said my neighbors are going, he said, you're right. I walked out of my house one day and my neighbor is packing up all his camping gear, and I asked him, where are you going? And he said, I'm going Burning Man. So that what strikes me with that is it means that the culture, the general culture, already is kind of bought into this idea of oneness. Even if they don't understand it, even if they don't recognize it, they're participating in it.
Well,
they're
tell you,
involved in that celebration.
Now, us cowboys ain't scared neither. Just saying, man.
That's good.
Hey, Art, we got a question from our live chat. MR2U2 asked a question. Do you got any insight on Tomorrowland events?
Oh, yeah. Tomorrowland, the great big Belgium EDM concert. I haven't been watching the last year or so, but from 2014 on, I kind of really watched what was happening with the Tomorrowland festivals, which are just massive. I mean, phenomenally massive electronic dance music festivals. What's really interesting with those festivals is not just the music, but the preaching that is being done as the stage sets are changing.
Well, Joel Osteen going to be there?
Pardon me?
Is Joel Osteen going to be there?
The message would kind of fit. The smile would kind of fit. But you know, the message that's being given is you're all one. We're all here in unity. We're all in this together. The world is coming together as one. That theme is just being pounded over and over again. And so Tomorrowland has that underlying worldview that they're selling you through the excitement of the music and the lights in the show.
All right, question from Kentucky Girl of the live chat as well. It says, how can you stand being in such a filthy spiritual atmosphere, Carl Tackerd?
Can you tell me where there isn't a filthy spiritual atmosphere?
Wow, I need a drum. Is this one? No. Anyway, yeah. Wow. It's not at the NFL game.
Well, here's the thing. Right now we're using the internet. If you want a filthy spiritual atmosphere, I can't find anything that's probably more filthy than the internet.
It is filthy, man. I mean, there's crap coming through there all the time. It's fed as news, but it's really like little teasers, like click bots, man. Say, oh, here's a half-naked girl or whatever, and they want you to. And I didn't ask for that in my feed, but they just counting on the fact that I'm going to click on that. And of course, we all know go somewhere else, get something to sell you. But yeah, man, filthy is right.
Right. We live in a filthy society. The difference is for myself when I go to events like this that are spiritually very challenging, and Burning Man. There's nudity. Absolutely. There's a ton of sexual innuendo.
Are they naked? You say there's naked? They're naked?
Oh, yes. There's definitely nudity. But for myself, I mean, this is my job to analyze, to try to understand, and also to try to strip through the hype. And that's a really important thing, to strip through the hype and to find out.
Strip through the hype? Okay, I got that.
What's the real world view that's being presented here?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in terms of filthiness, man, we got it everywhere.
I'll tell you what, that calls for a cold Guinness, what you just said right there. But no, you're absolutely right. It's a plague. It's an absolute plague. And I've predicted on the show, and it's pretty easy prediction to make. And it's interesting, too, before I tell you what the prediction is, that as events happen, if there's going to be a stock market crash, I don't know how many people on my Facebook feed and how many people on the news are going to say, I told you so 10 years ago. I've been telling you for 10 years ago, or we're going to get nuked, or, there's always that, somebody thinks they've got the news, but really the news, what's going to happen is pretty predictable. So I'm going to say, and I've said on the program before, pedophilia is going to be legalized within 5 years. That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. The one thing I noticed when I was at Burning Man, and I also was at a regional burn earlier in the summer, is that polyamorous relationships are definitely being touted as the next phase. Of course, polyamorous relationships, they can, again, challenge us the sense of what is marriage, because they talk about it in a contractual way. Quickly going back to the question of just our culture. And my wife in the background listened and was listening, and she was going, "Hey, you want a good example of how the Burning Man community kind of, you could dovetail it with today's culture? Go to any university setting and spend time poking around campuses, and you've got the same kind of attitudes, the same type of activities, the same kind of frat house, kind of situation. It's everywhere, Daniel. It's absolutely everywhere. And basically, Burning Man has that same flavoring. It's just bigger and far more dramatic, especially because the world's media is there watching.
Well, I mean, one of the telltale signs of a civilization that has broken down is when you have a congresswoman that wears tinfoil sequenced cowboy hats and acts like they got some kind of intelligence when they're really dumber than a bag of hammers. That's when you know that things have fallen in disrepair. Carl, so you're out in the midst of all these pagans and these Wiccans. Are you praying specific prayers of protection, or do you just feel like you walk in a divine bubble that that they can't really do anything, say, from a spiritual standpoint, supernatural standpoint?
You definitely are praying. Don't get me wrong. You definitely are praying. And more importantly, you have others who are praying as well. You're not going in lightly. You're not going in. I mean, it seems light because I go to quite a few of them. But you're not going in lightly. You're going in with an understanding that this is a place where that spiritual world is active, and there's you could definitely say it's uncomfortable. There's an element of where your spirit and their spirit clashes. I remember at Paganism on Saturday night for a few minutes, a little bit longer than a few minutes, but for part of the evening, it was kind of weird because I had groups watching me, and all of a sudden they're just like, why are they watching me? I mean, why are they looking at me? What's going on that sets them up to all of a sudden have 8 people turn and look at me and watch me? And all of a sudden another couple of minutes later, 3 more people turn and start watching as I'm going to a different room or walking down the hall or whatever. I didn't notice that and I'm very observant, I didn't notice that during the other day or the following day, but all of a sudden there's a point when you could tell something was a little bit weird, something was a little amiss. And what I could pin it on, I don't know. Was it spiritual? It could very well be.
I found myself in the middle of that kind of crap one time, Carl. A friend of mine invited me to a motorcycle meeting in southern Indiana. It's a big deal with bands and everything. So here in the middle, he said, "Hey, we got a Christian tent set up, man." So okay, so I'm going to go there. So there's a Christian tent there, and I got the motorcycle there, and then these women just walking by, man, like droopy. You might as well say droopy and droopy, man. It's like, what's going on? How does this? Are they coming for some spiritual uplift, nip and tuck, or what? I don't know. But anyway, sometimes we'll find ourselves in situations like that. Hey, by the way, in England, somebody was arrested recently for molesting tailpipes of cars. We'll leave it to the imagination how one molests a tailpipe or various tailpipes. But as far as the orgy dome down there in Burning Man, did anybody try to say backdoor the Burning Man before he got burnt?
Well, that's interesting. No, in terms of the orgy dome, the dome itself, if you wanted to go in and I didn't go in, I have no desire to go in. There's no need for me to go in. Zero need. Yeah. But even if you wanted to go in, you couldn't go in as a single person. You had to go in as a couple or more. Yeah. So, I mean, and stuff like that gets a lot of attention by the press. Hey, here's the orgy dome. I'll tell you what, Daniel. I was out in the middle of the desert late one night, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I get a ding on my phone, and there was a message that somebody had privately sent me, and the message read, 70,000 naked people having an orgy in the desert. And it's about the 2017 burn. And I'm standing there looking around going, really? I mean, I got thousands and thousands of people all around me right now, and most of us have clothes on or, something on, covering ourselves. It was clickbait. Was there stuff happening? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny it. There was all kinds of crazy stuff happening.
Hang on. I just got a text here. Daniel, did you really say that? Well, whoa. Not sure it was me. I could have been cloned. Maybe I'm on something. Carl, you're right. No, the country is a mess, and it's Russ Dizdar calls it the Black Awakening, and when he's on the program, and he's coming back on the program too. I don't know if you know who he is, but
yeah, I know Russ. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he is saying that there will be a time, a trigger moment, where all the sleepers will get some message of some kind, and they will turn on civilization in some way or fashion. But I'm just wondering if that's not already happened, and they've already got the message to attack. Because as you look around, the anger and hate that is in this society, and then what's going on really in the rest of the world, for that matter. So, I mean, have they already got the message?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because there's a lot of hostility towards Christianity. Hey, we did something a little bit different. I had a friend who came with me to Burning Man. We did a little something different at Burning Man. We set up a sign at our tent, and the sign said "Camp of the Unknown God," which comes out of Acts 17, when Paul goes to Mars Hill and he sees all these monuments in Athens to different deities, and he sees one that says "to the unknown God," and he uses that. This is Paul. He uses that back in his day to launch into the gospel and to bring them the message of truth. And so my friend Bob and I, who came with, and my buddy Bob, he's actually been to the burn back when it was held in the 1990s. So we set this sign up at our Camp of the Unknown God. Mm-hmm. And I thought that we'd have some hostility. We didn't. We actually had people coming by, stopping and going, "Who is this unknown God? Can you tell me about this unknown God?" And we would say, "Hey, sit down. Here's a Gatorade. Here's some water." Or if it was in the morning, we'd make some coffee for them. We'd give them some food. Mm-hmm. And then we'd talk. Sometimes talk for an hour. Sometimes we'd talk for 2 hours, talking about Christianity, talking about the difference between pagan spirituality, temporary spirituality. And I had to remind one young man, I said, "Look, all we're doing here in the desert, this spirituality you're pursuing, this is temporary. Mm-hmm. So temporary, at the end of the week, we burn it all. That's temporary."
How do you minister to a bunch of naked people, Carl?
Well, first of all, again,
you don't look, or what? I mean, how you do it?
Again, that's kind of the hype of it, because not everybody's naked. In fact,
okay, all right. Some people got clothes on. Okay, good deal.
Way more people have clothes than don't.
All right.
So nonetheless, you still have people coming by who are nude and whatever. I mean, that is how it is.
Yeah,
so you have to accept that.
Yeah. I mean, some people are offensive in that they shouldn't have their clothes off, man. I mean, it got some really eye damage there so we got to watch that. Hey, here's and I do remember this article. Somebody from live chat pointed out, wasn't there somebody that ran into the fire?
Yes, there was. It was really, really tragic. Don't know if he was on drugs. I haven't heard any of the reports back yet. The toxology report that came out initially was that there was no alcohol, but there was no determination about drugs yet. He was a 41-year-old man. It was his first burn, and the man had been burning for about 20 minutes or so. A lot of the heavy beam structures, the wooden structures, the beams were still standing. And he was on the 10 o'clock side. I was on about the 5 o'clock side. So I never saw it, Daniel. I never saw it. Okay. But it was tragic. The guy ran. He ran by all the fire marshals. They tried to stop him. And then the images that I've seen, the video I've seen, it looks like he dives into it. The fire marshals had to wait until some of the structure collapsed because it was so unstable already. They went in. Of course, the fire marshals have all the suits on. They're geared up to go in. They pull him out. He lived until Sunday morning, I think 6 o'clock in the morning. It was bad. It was really, really bad. I was at the temple, which was about
hang on. I lost my train of thought there, Carl, because I was just thinking of the movie Highlander, where this one guy said it's better to burn out than to fade away. And I was thinking, wait a minute, man, I shouldn't be thinking that thought. But anyway, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, back on track. What do you got?
Well, yeah, the thing that's kind of struck me with that is at the temple, and there's a temple structure that was built about a quarter mile or maybe a third of a mile north of the man. And it was a large temple, it was 90 feet high, 150 feet wide, an amazing structure. But people write down all kinds of thoughts, wishes, their desires, their anguishes on the walls of the temple. And very early in the week, I saw a message written by somebody, and the message was basically a declaration of suicide. And I'm struck by that. I mean, because nobody knows who put that on the wall. But I'm bothered by it because is that the same guy that ran into the fire? Because he effectively committed suicide at the burn. This isn't the first time somebody's attempted it, but it's the first time somebody's been successful at running into the fire at Burning Man. Now, a couple of years ago at a regional burn, Element 11 in Utah, some person, I believe he was in his early 30s, managed to run in and committed suicide by rushing into the flames there too. So these things do happen. I'm not really sure sometimes why. Is it some people suggested, hey, it could be demonic. It could be drug induced. It could be some guy saying, hey, I want to make a mark, and doing something just sensational and stupid. I don't know. I don't know what would drive a person to do something like that. But it was really, really tragic. I feel bad for the family and for those people who saw him do it.
Isn't it that that spirits cause people to destroy themselves like that?
We see that in the New Testament. So there could be a possibility that that's there. I don't know. I would love to see what the toxology report finally showed.
Well, I'd like to see the toxology report of Stephen Paddock, the Vegas shooter, but somehow that thing is never coming out.
Exactly.
Now, why is that?
Yeah, there's lots of strange things around that, but nonetheless, I can't say why he did it.
I was going to say that's a whole new category called the shooting man.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? I mean, why can't I make that connection?
Hey, well, we don't know because we just don't know. And that came, of course, only a few weeks after Burning Man, but. For myself at the burn itself, the thing that really struck myself was being around the temple and just seeing so much of the sadness and the hopelessness as people literally were expressing the grief at the temple structure. So when the things burnt, when the man himself burnt on Saturday night, it was a celebration, it was a party, it was loud. When the temple burnt Sunday night, it was quiet, it was somber. There was a lady standing a couple of feet away from me. She was weeping. You could hear people weeping, quietly weeping as it burnt. And you realize that this is what people are looking for. People are looking for some type of spirituality, some type of a connection, some type of a sacredness. But they've rejected it, and they don't even know what they've rejected. But they've rejected the only one that doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And they've instead opted out for something that's temporary. And something that we literally burn at the end of the week.
Well, it's interesting. That key word just triggered a thought bubble in my own head, sacredness. Just this week, that came into the mainstream with, I believe, General Kelly was talking about that Frederica Wilson, congresswoman, who listened in on a sacred phone call between the commander-in-chief to a Gold Star family, and she listened in and tried to score political points, and he posed the question, is there nothing sacred left in this country? Certainly, the anthem used to be sacred. It's no longer sacred. I mean, you can go through anything that the Americans held dear and reverenced, and now it's irreverence toward whatever that is. Where has the sacredness gone, Carl, and what does that mean to us as a society?
That's a really interesting question. Really interesting question. You're right. There seems to be nothing left that's sacred. Everything seems to be kind of like in an open shooting range. It's crazy. So you've got your anthem doesn't mean anything. The office of your president, and of course I'm a Canadian, so we've got other issues on my side of the border. But you're right. Western civilization has thrown away anything that has lasting value. We've got a throwaway society, and that means now we are throwing away things as important as those bedrock institutions that have kept civilization on a firmer grounding. And so everything can be thrown away. We're in that throwaway society. And at the same time, while we're throwing it all away, we're still looking for something. In fact, the more we throw things away, the more people seem to be hungering for some kind of meaning or purpose or some type of spirituality. And yet we will not, as a society, turn around and look to see what we've rejected, which is Christianity. That we're not going to do.
Well, that is the bedrock for the entire Western civilization. I mean, and people should look and see what Western civilization has gave to them and has built for them, and health developments, discoveries, and financial things, and just so many things that came from that. And it's like, okay, well, if you undermine it, what does a society build from chaos?
Right.
You don't build anything. All it is you tear down things until there's nothing left to tear down. You would think those on that side that believe in that would consider, and they consider themselves more intelligent because the myths of the Christian heritage and the Gospels and the Bible to them is an anathema, and so they think they have the answer because they're so intelligent. But they never project and say what the world would be if they were in charge. And as far as I can tell, it's just chaos.
Well, that's a good point. We're in uncharted territory. If we would go back, in the annals of history, back to the New Testament, where we have largely a pagan world, and Rome was a pagan culture. We see eventually Christianity rising, coming up, and ending up becoming the worldview that helps to build civilization in the West as we know it, and the pagan worldview kind of just went back into the shadows or dissipated. Now we're seeing the exact reversal. So we're in uncharted territories. We're now rejecting Christianity, and we're raising paganism back up. So that's something that hasn't really happened before. You could maybe look at certain countries and say, well, this happened, let's say, in the early part of last century in Germany. It certainly seemed to start taking shape there. We saw that. You can point to a few other countries. You saw it from a very blatant secularist position in the Soviet Union, where the power of the Soviet man overcame the nation and displaced Christianity. So we have examples, but we don't have necessarily examples of an entire, in this case, the entire Western world kind of finding itself unglued, from Europe to North America to Australia to New Zealand. There's a shift right across the Western world. What's interesting is while this shift is happening in our world, other parts of the planet, parts of Africa, parts of Asia, you're seeing Christianity on the rise. You're seeing Christianity on the rise in China, wherever the underground church is. There seems to be a strong Christian presence. So while the West is throwing it all away, other parts of the world are still looking at it, and that's encouraging.
Okay, well, that's a good note for us to end the first hour on the program. Here, Carl, we take a 5-minute break. We just keep you on the line, but we turn you down. But before we do, anything you'd like to say about any website, blog, or any upcoming book, or any kind of thing you got going on? You just say it right now.
Right now, I'm working on a book, and hopefully it'll be out in about 4 to 6 months. The book is titled Game of Gods, The Temple of Man in the Age of Reenchantment.
Wow, I love that title. Okay, Carl, I'll just stay on the line there. We'll be back with you in 5 minutes. All right. All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. And if you missed any of the exciting first hour with Carl Tykrib, it will again replay in our main player directly after the show. We'll put it in our TuneIn radio playlist as well, and we'll podcast it as well too. Additionally, I guess you could say. Next week we have with us Kelly Lee and Michael Broski on the program. 2 weeks. L.A. Marzulli will be back with the program, and Jonathan Gray will follow that up with Ancient Technology. Let's go back to our newsmaker line and welcome Carl back. Carl, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Well, we actually left the first hour in a positive note in that you say there is an expansion of the moral base going around the world, particularly in the Christian communities that it appears to be growing. How is that going in the Middle East? Have they cut everybody's head off, or are there any Christians left there? Yeah,
that's the Middle East is well, it depends where you are in the Middle East. It's a big place. And there are Christians. There are Christians who are standing firm. When I consider the Christians in the Middle East and in other parts of the world where there is still a real hostility, I mean, you can't get much more hostile than the Middle East when it comes to Christianity. They really deserve our prayers. They need our prayers.
Mm-hmm. And that always bothered me. Why doesn't the mainstream Christian churches talk about that? Is it because there's no money contribution? There's something they may actually have to do? I mean, why don't they talk about the brothers and sisters over there?
I know. The persecuted church, the global persecuted church, because it's happening in all kinds of parts of the world. We're supposed to be praying for these people. They are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we need to keep them in prayer. And you're right. I mean, sometimes it seems, especially in our westernized church culture, we're far more interested in self-help and social development and big nice smiles than we are in necessarily saying, hey, we're standing in prayer. If we can find a way of supporting and helping directly or indirectly with the persecuted church, and there are organizations that do that, let's jump on board. The church that I attend, every once in a while, there are messages that reflect back on what's happening to the persecuted church and encourage us. They're encouraging us to keep them in prayer, and then also to support organizations that are directly helping those people who are suffering behind the closed doors of the Arab world, the Middle Eastern world, and in parts of Asia and other parts of the world.
Carl, let me ask you. You are from our northern continent, brothers up there, Canada. What's the spiritual life like up there?
Best way of saying it is we're probably into a post-Christian reality. Definitely, Christianity has been on the wane in my country for a long time, especially mainstream Christianity. There still is a segment of evangelical and conservative Christianity, that's for sure. But the change has been very, very rapid, and especially over the last 25 years. I don't have the figures right in front of me, but I do know that some of the largest religious movements by percentages has been through the pagan community, and so Stats Canada or Statistics Canada, as they've done some of that research, have noted that by percentage, paganism is probably one of the largest growing religious categories in terms of doing their statistical work. Christianity, for the most part, is it's kind of halfway between Europe and you guys. And whereas Europe is almost completely gone over the edge in terms of secularism, and we're kind of halfway there. We're moving away from Christianity. There's no question about that.
Didn't I hear? Is it against the law to preach against homosexuality in Canada?
Technically, yes, it is, and it also depends on how you do it. And as well as real gray areas. Not gray. The law says more or less to that effect. You can be hauled up to a human rights tribunal. Whoa. That's their language. That's the type of a court system. And,
wow.
And you can end up having to more or less, find yourself on the hot seat when it comes to what you said about homosexuality. Some of it too, Daniel, depends on how you say it. And there is some room to maneuver around that. So you have to kind of know what the law says and then do it in a way that is tactful yet honest, truthful, yet with a measure of understanding. Okay, what are the laws and how do they work?
Wow, I meant, do they have do they ask that preachers present their messages to the state before they can preach on Sunday or whenever they do?
Oh no, nothing like that.
Not yet. Not yet. No. But let me tell you something, Carl. That's already happened here in this country. I think it was in Denver, or one of the suburbs of Colorado. The mayor ordered all the preachers to turn in their sermons.
That would go over like a lead balloon.
Fortunately, but the fact that she had to. I think it was Houston. It was Houston. The fact that it was even done, whether they had to back off of that, but that tells you that's where they're at. They want to do that. Yeah. When somebody just fired the first volley, said, "Well, we'll back off this time, but we're coming back." I mean, no doubt about it. They'll be back.
Oh yeah. That's how things work. You always back off and then you regroup and try again. Maybe in a different way, but you always try it again.
Well, they're going to try it again. It's going to get ugly, I tell you that. All right, here's a question for you. It says, did your wife go with you to the Burning Man?
No, my wife just heard that.
I heard that.
She laughed. There's just no way she wants to go and spend a week in temperatures where 100 degrees is your cool day, and where we had dust storms on, especially on Tuesday, but we had dust storms pretty well every day. We had some dust storms, but Monday and Tuesday were wild dust storms. Tuesday the dust storms were just incredible. I couldn't see past my bicycle tire at one point when I was caught in a 30-minute dust storm. So it's not exactly the kind of environment my wife would like to go to, though I've been dropping not so subtle hints saying, hey, if we have a chance to go next year, there's opportunity there to come along and to make a difference as well.
Well, Carl, it sounds like you owe her a trip of her choosing. Where would she like to go in the United States?
That's Hawaii. She just said Hawaii. Daniel, I owe her double trips.
Yes,
I owe her double trips.
Yes, you do.
Because not only did I go to Burning Man and she didn't come, not that she wanted to, on my way down to Burning Man, I was traveling through Idaho. I'm from Manitoba, so I'm just north of North Dakota. Traveling through Idaho late at night. I was north of Idaho Falls by about 70 miles, and I smoke a deer. I'm probably doing 85 miles an hour. It's an 80-mile-an-hour speed limit, and my view of speed limits seems to be that means the lower limit. But anyway, so I smoked this deer doing at least 80 miles an hour, and I totaled my truck on the spot. And so I was able to get thankfully some friends chipped in, and I was able to get a rental car from Idaho Falls, make the rest of the trip down to the burn, and then I had to come back to Idaho Falls, drop off my car. But my poor wife, she had to get in our other vehicle and do, I guess it would be almost a 20-hour trip to come rescue me in Idaho Falls. And she ended up having to take time off of work and take time off of her schedule to do that. So I owe her a double trip.
Yes, you do. We're trying to shame you right into it. Hey, though, I want to thank you Canadians, though, because Trump being in office, a lot of the illegal immigrants that have stolen Social Security numbers and are sponging off of our government through health care and through subsidies for housing expenses, some of them are migrating into Canada. And so we want to thank you guys because I understand you guys have open arms. And can we send you a couple 100,000 more?
No.
But you guys, Canada's all about love, eh?
Just like America's a big melting pot.
A melting down pot, more like it. But okay, all right. So we've got what did you call it? Pagathon or Pagacon? Is that? And we here in Indianapolis we have something called Gen Con, where people dress up in all kinds of weirdo outfits, and for the most part they're harmless. And it doesn't seem like they're certainly not walking naked in the streets of Indianapolis, but it seems to be a grounding type of, or almost like a gateway drug to something like a Burning Man thing. But when you talk about Pagan Con, what else goes on there? Do they have seances there and things like that?
Well, when I was at Paganicon, which the name of it is interesting. It's basically the conference for Paganistan, the Wiccan community, the pagan community of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding region of Minnesota, and actually into eastern Wisconsin as well. There's enough pagans, there's enough covens, and enough circles. In fact, Minnesota has, I believe, over 330 covens and circles that they view that part of the world as Paganistan. And so what happened at this conference for Paganistan, and the one I went to was the 7th annual Paganicon. There was workshops, there were rituals. There was an opening ritual where we moved as a procession from one of the main rooms into a second room where the ritual itself would take place, and they sang a song that reflected their journey into the underworld. They were going down below. I was in that procession, and I cut away from the door going into the room. I didn't need to go in. There's no point in that. That's not my place. That's theirs. That's not mine. But I went to the workshops. I watched some of the rituals, and just I listened to people. I spent most of my time just listening, trying to get a handle of where people came from, where they see themselves going. And at this point, Daniel, this is really interesting. At this point, the pagan community, because of its growth, recognizes that they too are in a transition period, and that they too, in order for them to expand and to grow, will have to start coming together more than what they have in the past, and they're going to have to start strategizing differently and tackling this differently. And because the pagan community isn't monolithic. They don't always get along with each other. That's for sure.
Let me ask something, Carl Tucker. The previous president, he used a statement against half the population of the United States, and when he said there are people in this country that want to cling to their guns and their Bible, as if he took the high ground of, again, as I mentioned in the first hour, that is, the opiate of the masses, their Christian religion. But at the same time, half of that side of the aisle, as far as I can tell, there are unknown amount of witch covens that are casting spells against Donald Trump. We have the near president of the United States, Hillary Clinton, said she wants a voodoo doll to stab, a Trump doll. I mean, they're just as much involved with sort of spiritual stuff. There's no high ground there. But, like you said earlier, there's a thirst of this thing. It's not even the enemy, the stupid people in this country, believe in some kind of spirituality. They just don't want the Christian version.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the workshops I attended at Paganicon, it was a fascinating workshop. It was a roundtable discussion about the ethics of curses and the question of Donald Trump and the curses that were put on him by the Wiccan community was front and center in our discussion. The people that were there, none of them admitted that they were a part of that, and that's fine. Maybe they weren't. I'm not going to argue that because I don't know. But they all recognize that in many ways that was a public relations nightmare for them. And they talked quite a bit about the people that engaged in that and kind of spearheaded that movement within the Wiccan community to say, hey, on this particular day, we're all going to be putting a hex or putting a curse on Trump. And as they were discussing this in the workshop, the lecture kind of went for about an hour or so. There was a lot of recognition that, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, because it did exactly what you're just describing, Daniel. It demonstrated to the non-pagan world that the pagan world itself has a vindictive side to it, has a side to it that's ugly. And I'm sitting there, I'm sitting there listening. I'm the fly on the wall. I'm listening to it all going, really interesting for me to listen and watch as they debate the ethics of what they just participated in regarding Donald Trump, and how in many ways it backfired in terms of the PR side.
Is it possible? I mean, when you look back, didn't Nancy Reagan, didn't she consult with spirits or have seances? And didn't Abraham Lincoln's wife do the same thing?
There's a long history of interest that way, yes.
Mm-hmm. Why isn't people in power gravitate toward that when they already have power?
We have the same thing in Canada too. We've seen some of that with with the history of some of our politicians. That's an interesting question. There seems to be a gravitation towards that, an interest in that spiritual realm and the spiritual world. Doesn't mean everybody does it. In fact, I have friends who are very politically active in the U.S. And they're solid Christians, they're solid believers. So you can't brushstroke the whole body, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But you're right. There seems to be a real interest with certain people in places of high power that gravitate to this. You could call it to the antagonistic side or the enemy side of Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's all the deal about spirit cooking? What's going on there?
I've heard stuff. I've seen little snippets and stuff, but honestly, Daniel, I haven't pursued that.
Well, that's a whole nother cesspool of the demonic worship, I guess, of some sort there. But okay. People, I always thought, especially when you talk about Masons, and I flashed your Mason book in our background several times. It's not just that they wear funny hats and ride little bicycles and get out of clown cars. And I'm telling you, man, one of these times, Frederica Wilson, one of our congresswomen, is going to get out of clown. Looks like she just came out of a clown car. But isn't it because there is some sort of power there, or is it all fun and games? I mean, even George Bush and John Kerry were members, or probably are card-carrying members of Skull and Bones. And in that organization, you have to get in a casket naked while these druid-looking freaks go around, and you tell them your deepest, darkest sin that would embarrass the crap out of you should you ever, to keep that whole organization quiet. But is it just fun and games, or is there getting power? I mean, what's your view?
I think it's way more than fun and games. My area where I began doing research on these kinds of issues, my first point of contact was with Freemasonry. I was being pressured to join the lodge back in the early 1990s, and they were nice people. They were all people who sat on a board of directors that I worked under, so I answered to them. I mean, they were the ones who wrote my paycheck. And they were pressuring me to join the lodge. Daniel, I never joined. I had no interest in joining. But one of them said something to me during a supper meeting, and it changed the course of my life.
What's that?
He said to me, Carl, we're not Satanists. And this is like 1991, 1990, and I'm in the back of my mind, I've got bells going off going, what in the world have you ever been accused of? I mean, this is before the internet. This is before History Channel. This is before documentaries. I didn't know that there was a handful of Christian books written on the subject. But at that point, I went, I have to know what in the world you've just been accused of. Why would you say this to me? What a poor sales job you just presented to me. If I went to go buy a car somewhere and said, yeah, I like it, it's kind of interesting, but you're not telling me much about it, which is how Freemasonry works. They just say we're about making good men better, which is an interesting thought right there, because that implies I'm good. No. I'm a sinner. What is good is Christ. I'm a sinner. But we make good men better. But they don't tell you anything really about it. And so, I would ask, are you political? No. Are you religious? No. And then came the sales pitch. We make good men better. Well, whip-de-doo.
Let me ask you, Carl. Here in the United States, there's this phenomena of football players kneeling during our national anthem. But I'm wondering if obviously they're a bunch of stupid thugs. I mean, we all know that. Okay, they're just goons. But when they kneel, they think that they're kneeling for some kind of social justice malarkey. I don't even know. Nobody knows really. They don't even know because they're dumber than a bag of hammers, most of them, and never really graduated high school, most of them too. But is it that they've been tricked? And when they are kneeling, because if you research kneeling, it is the method to be prostrate before a superior being or God type figure. Is that what's really going on? They don't even know it.
You're subjugating yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you could take it that far with that, but maybe you could.
I can.
Yeah, I know with Freemasonry, yes, you end up kneeling before the worshipful master.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
pretty crazy stuff. My interest in trying to understand that, though, gravitated to what their worldview was,
Mm-hmm.
and two things really struck me, Daniel. One was universalism, that all religions essentially can bow to the same shrine of Freemasonry, and that we're all part of this universal brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what you really believe, as long as you believe in a god of some kind, regardless of if you're a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you say you believe in a supreme deity, you can bow. Well, that's universalism. Number one, if you're a Christian, that's already over the line. The other thing that came out over and over again is perfectibility. And we can perfect ourselves. We perfect ourselves through our rites, through our rituals. Even the name of some of the degrees resonate with perfectibility. And so that came out as I studied this. That came out
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. We're going from being a rough stone to the perfect stone, the perfect
Mm-hmm.
ashlar,
Mm-hmm.
and we are perfecting ourselves through the lodge. Sorry, as a Christian, I am not perfect. There's nothing about me that is perfect. I rest positionally in the perfection of Jesus Christ, not in what a bunch of men are doing in a dark room somewhere.
Whoa.
No, thank you.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the back to the football analogy there, the guy that started it, Colin Kaepernick, he seems like he's a real candidate for the orgy dome out there at Burning Man, so we'll probably see him out there soon. But listen, what about Mark of the Beast and transhumanism? How does all this fit into this paganism?
Well, a number of the workshops I went to at Burning Man had kind of a transhumanist theme, especially as they were trying to just kind of work through what does social media and technology look like? How is this going to end up changing so much of our world? And as you know, I've been to transhumanist events. In fact, in 2013, I was invited to speak as a Christian critic of religious transhumanism to a transhumanist group out of Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. And so I've had a fair amount of interaction in the transhumanist community. Next year's Burning Man is going to be interesting because the theme for next year was released 2 days ago. And the theme is I, Robot, coming, of course, out of Asimov's book series and out of Isaac Asimov's science fiction.
Wow.
But the whole theme is certainly going to have a transhumanist flavor. And there's no bones about it. There's no hiding it. In fact, on the Burning Man webpage, as you go through the theme release article, Larry Harvey, the founder of Burning Man, describes and talks about asking the question, what does it mean to be a human? How is AI going to integrate? How are we going to integrate with AI? Where does the human-machine interface? How does this all kind of work? That becomes the theme for next year's Burn,
wow.
which is really, really interesting because the transhumanist community and the Burning Man community mm-hmm. have had a lot of overlap. Mm-hmm. Google and the Burning Man community in many ways are very similar. In fact, when Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, who made Google what it is today, when he was going to get the job as CEO, one of his requirements was for him to be at the Burn, to participate in the Burn, and from that point on, they would determine whether he was a good fit for Google or not.
Wow!
Hey, Google's first doodle was the Burning Man in 1997.
Really?
Yes.
Well, see, it seemed like they're in on it. I know, interestingly, Amazon, I think the second in command there was just kicked out of the organization for either molesting a woman or raping a woman or some kind of thing like that going on. So, yeah, I mean, this sort of orgy stuff goes way up in there. I mean, Hollywood is coming out. I mean, with all the women saying, there really shouldn't even be a euphemism called the casting couch. It's almost like a joke. But it's really not, because there's the sexual payment that they're forcing women to do. And now, of course, if you're up on that, guys are coming out and saying they've been on that casting couch, man. I mean, it gets even sicker over there. Chances are a little kid's been on that casting couch too. But I wouldn't mind seeing the Hollywood sign on that hill. turned into a Burning Man thing right there, and maybe those people can worship that. But Hollywood has been at the forefront of pushing paganism themselves, and many of them are involved in paganism. And you got that whole Scientology thing going on. What is their role in society of turning America against its foundations into this sort of paganism future?
Well, I think their primary role is to prep the mind and soul of people, because whatever you're reading, whatever you're watching, whatever you're viewing, will preach a worldview message of some kind. Sometimes it's a fairly benign message, but Hollywood has not been giving us benign messages. Hollywood has been giving us very powerful imagery, very powerful symbols, very powerful messages that feed into the pagan worldview. Probably for me, and it's an older movie already, quite a few years old already, but it fits so well. And that is the movie Avatar, the one that James Cameron put together. And there's going to be a new one apparently coming out. I'm not sure what the date is. Frankly, I don't really keep up on what's happening in Hollywood. But Avatar was the quintessential pagan / transhumanist / oneness movie, where transhumanism, spirituality, Gaia, the energy of the earth demonstrated through this new planet, networking in with your mind, your consciousness, all of it working as one. We're all part of this oneness, this feeling. By the way, in the movie, the bad guy is the United States, and the bad guy is capitalism, and the bad guy is all of the traditional positions that you as a nation kind of hold. That's the bad guy. So Hollywood has been preaching to us for a long, long time. And yes, Hollywood goes to Burning Man. This year, I don't know who all was there. I know Paris Hilton goes. Paris Hilton goes enough that she's kind of considered a queen of Burning Man. This year, the Victoria's Secret models were all out there strutting around and taking pictures. So, there definitely is this interest Hollywood has with Burning Man. And, hey, Hollywood has been giving us the pagan worldview for a long time.
So do you feel, as a Christian, more and more isolation, or how do you view that? How do you feel personally about this whole thing?
Yeah, to a point, Daniel. Number one, okay, I live out in the sticks of Canada. I'm a farm boy originally from the prairies of Canada. All right. We're already fairly removed where we live from a lot of stuff, but it doesn't change the fact that you can see where the culture is going. And I don't think it's an issue of do we feel isolated. I think it should be more of an issue of where do we see the opportunity? Where do we see the opportunity to do what Paul did at Mars Hill, and wherever you may find yourself, whether it's in your coffee shop or whether it's with your friends or whether it's who knows, wherever you find yourself, looking for those opportunities to be able to leverage the worldview that's around you, because it's right here in my part of the world, out in the middle of nowhere, prairies of Canada. Wow. It's right in your part of the world in Indianapolis. I can guarantee you that. I go to Indianapolis fairly often. It's there. Yeah. So
here's one you may not have heard, that there's always been a dispute about the name Indianapolis or Indiana, and they say, well, it's based on the Indians. Well, there's also another way to look at that. If you look at the name of the city, Indianapolis, it's Indianapolis. In Diana, of course, Diana is a goddess, and plus being the city. So there definitely seems to be some sort of pagan thing. One day in Indianapolis, there's an Indianapolis flag that has sort of a cross on it. One day, the downtown buildings, there must have been 5 of those flags that were upside down. Now, that just doesn't happen by accident. To me, that was Illuminati or paganism or child worship in action, in process or something going on here. So, yeah, I definitely wouldn't say that it's immune to the effects of paganism. And as we move forward in time, it's going to get worse. Somebody pointed out in the live chat that the Playboy just had its first transgender. So I mean, of course, it won't be very long. They'll have the first, transgender doing a hog or something, on the front page, and saying it's a whole new realm there. So society is going to be breaking down. Where do you see the progression of paganism taking the Western civilization in particular?
Well, I see it. I see definitely it will have more of an influence in terms of policies and in terms of how we look at our society. It's not that they're going to all of a sudden, you're not going to have a rush of, let's say, Wiccans or Druids or whatever taking office positions. That's not necessarily what I see. I see, however, the worldview being pushed from the side of education, from what your children are already accepting, what your children and grandchildren are already adopting as normal, which really comes out of a pagan worldview. I see that as having more danger, because in the next generation, the change is going to be immense in the next generation. And then you're going to see, then you will see people who take positions of power in your city hall, on your school boards. They'll be your school teachers. They already are all of this.
Yeah, well, these freaks in general don't like to work, though, so how are they going to get in charge?
You always end up, your utopian dreams always have to be paid somehow. And so you may say, hey, I'm not going to work, I'm not going to do anything. The hippies from the 1960s kind of said that. Now they're wearing business suits.
Carl, let me ask you something. In the near future, are Christians going to be the main ingredient of Soylent Green?
In some parts of the world, they've been persecuted that way. In some parts of the world, they've been persecuted to death. I hope it doesn't happen here, but it may happen here.
Well, as we're repeating, as we're talking about in the first hour, talking about the sort of repeating, going back to paganism, which really just put us into put the world in the Dark Ages. That's really what it was. It was paganism. Dark Ages is what it was, and then it came to the world of enlightenment. But as we're repeating that process, well, the as you mentioned, the Germans killed the Jews in the same sort of way. So that's really not too far from the truth there.
No, I know that. I know that. In fact, it's a disturbing thought, but it's historically there's accuracy there. Same within Russia. Same with well, you could look at so many different parts of the world where socialism and communism ended up taking root and putting the gun to Christian heads. And we may end up being in that position again. I don't know the timetable. I don't know the future that way, Daniel. But I do know that all the signs are there saying that Christianity, we are under the gun. Christians need to take that seriously. I'm not saying that. We need to take up a militant side to it. That's not going to win this. This is not about that. This is about standing true to what is true. This is about standing firm in what is true and what is real. And sometimes that's going to cost us. That might cost us a lot.
You always got to check stuff coming through your Facebook feed, but somebody had a picture. They said that their son took of an assignment, and it said, imagine the President of the United States ordered everyone to take RFID chip in the skin. Would you approve, or something to that effect? Isn't that where we're also going, where and forced inoculations is also happening? Isn't it that we're going to be eventually forced into obeying this sort of pagan world?
We may be. That will depend, of course, on what happens. I think especially what happens in the next 3 to 5 years. How is your next election going to pan out? I hate to say this, but I see a pendulum swing possibly happening at your next election. We had that kind of a pendulum swing here when Canada booted out Stephen Harper, who was a conservative, a Christian, who worked hard to balance budgets. And whether you liked all of his policies or not, he at least kept us on a pretty stable track.
Are you saying, Carl, are you saying that we're going to get Hillary back?
You might get Hillary.
She will not get, that bag lady will not go away. And you talk about if there's going to be a pendulum swing, it's going to be toward that thing.
Well, that or a Hillary Sanders type of political personality.
Now you guys got that kid running your country, don't you?
Yeah, we do.
Now, where do you get his wisdom from? Okay Google or okay Siri or what?
Pardon me?
Where did that little boy running your country, man? Where did he get his wisdom?
You just used a word that I'm not quite sure is to be properly used. I'm not really sure if there's a lot of wisdom that comes through right now our political process. He definitely has an ideological bent. Yeah. And I think what he really is gunning for, what he really would like to have, is a seat at the United Nations. That seems to be where he's kind of going. They just gave him an award a couple of weeks ago as a good global citizen. Yada yada yada. He's instituted a carbon tax, which my province has not adopted yet, but they probably will have to. He is exemplifying what it means to be kind of an internationalist, because that's what his daddy was.
Is Castro his father?
Yeah, well, really interesting pictures when you compare them, but I can't say. I have never seen the blood analysis. I can't say, but
I can.
Wow, the pictures are pretty remarkable.
Well, man, come on, man. It's clear that Angela Merkel is Hitler's daughter. I mean, come on. And then you got Aleister Crowley is Barbara Bush's brother, or is her incestuous. I'm not even sure what they were doing over there. But I mean, so there is a breakdown of civilization into paganism, and we have witches and covens in this country, and that is growing. So, what is it about the sort of the traditional religious institutions that are leaving so many people in dismay and wanting for something what they would term real?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's good. One of the things that we have done within the Christian world is we have strayed away from our true love. We've strayed away from truth, and so we have become a marketplace. That's all we've become. We've become a marketplace. We become seeker sensitive, and I understand the meaning and why that trend was there a number of years ago. The trend is still there for some churches, but we've kept away from talking of the hard issues. We've kept away from talking of what is right, what is wrong, what is sin, where does our salvation come from, and we've drifted into feel-good psychology. We've drifted into social justice. We've drifted into all kinds of other areas, and so the church has become nothing more than, in many ways, a community hub, a service group.
Can't social justice just be summed up as send me a check?
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty much all it is?
Yeah. Yeah, and you pay for it, absolutely. But the churches, we've had this move like this for a long time, and so people become disgruntled. People look at this and go, "There's no life here. There's nothing here. This is shallow." And it is. That is shallow. And so
what you're saying is Joel Osteen's not cutting it with these people.
Exactly. And so the mainstream of Christianity has moved away from what is true. And when that happens, and when we no longer know what we believe, we start searching. And we have a culture that already says, "Come search with me." And the culture holds your hand, and then the culture leads you down these other paths.
Did the hippie movement of the '60s was that the dawning or the spawning of this movement? It seemed like it sort of came in and then maybe sort of faded away after people figured out they had to have jobs. I mean, is that some residue of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, this is the revolution of the 1960s finally coming to its fruition. There's no disputing that. And it's not so much the hippie movement, but some of the influences behind that movement that still have some influence. I look at what happened with Esalen and the Esalen Institute, which came into being in the early 1960s in the Big Sur region of California, becoming really the gateway for the Eastern worldview, for Eastern mysticism to enter the U.S., being the launching pad for the human potential movement, marrying psychology and spirituality. It really gave rise to the 1960s. It was in many ways probably one of the most influential institutions within the U.S. And it was really just a spiritual retreat center, but it catered to the rich, it catered to Hollywood, it catered to the trendsetters of the day, and that worldview, that influence has never gone away. Instead, they put on business suits. They become your school teachers. They become your educators. They become your civic leaders. They became the ministers in your churches. For goodness sakes, ministers were going to Esalen to sit in the hot tubs, talking about progressive theology, taking it back to their congregations. Esalen plays a massive role in the transformation of America. If you don't know much about Esalen, it's well worth the study. Esalen still exists. In fact, now Burning Man goes to Esalen for their leadership summits. Not that they did before. That's a fairly new thing that they've been doing. But Esalen has a monumental role in the transformation of America's soul.
Now, how do we resist this transformation?
Number one, resist it within your own family.
Talk about the resistance. Here in this country, there's something called the resistance. I think there needs to be an equal, opposite, and more powerful resistance to their resistance.
Right. And I think I know it has to start with the individuals, first of all, who hear this. It has to start with your own family, because it's your own family that's being changed. I mean, if we don't, first of all, ground our own families and secure the importance of our family, then it doesn't matter what the rest of culture does. If you've lost your family, that itself is a personal tragedy. And so we need to start taking a very active role in bringing truth, love into our own families' situations. And then also taking those stands wherever you find yourself. That may be, if you're a teacher in the school system, being able to have an influence there. It may cost you. In fact, I've been on the phone the last little while with a person who's part of the education system, who's probably going to end up losing her job because she's willing to take a stand for what is biblically true, and she knows that is not going to go well with her boss. And so we need to start doing that. We haven't been doing that. We've been looking to say, what's the big things we can do to change? Well, the big thing we can do is if we all did something in terms of presenting truth and exhibiting truth and being that voice for being truth, being what we're supposed to be as Christians, ambassadors for Christ.
With all the witches pronouncing curses upon Donald Trump, what would, say, a group of Christians do in response to that?
Pray for those. Pray first of all for Donald Trump. Pray also for the Wiccans. Here's one thing for people to really, we have to realize. We have to understand, and this has been really tough for us as Christians. They're people. They are people. They are your sons. They are your daughters. They are your neighbors. And I stress this over and over again because in the Christian world, we have battled our enemies instead of loving our enemies. We have battled,
I might beg to differ with you on that, Carl. From what I can tell is the church has gone out of its way up into including making homosexuals preachers and priestesses or whatever.
That's not loving your enemies. That's bending to the will of society. That's different than loving your enemies. Loving your enemies is still being willing to say, hey, this is what is true. You might not like it, but this is what is true. I'm going to pray for you. You come on in. We're going to sit down and have a cup of coffee. You may completely disagree with me, but I'm going to have to tell you what is true from a biblical point of view. We're going to wrestle through this, and we'll do it in a way that's honest. Now, when churches just say, we're going to open up our doors for whatever, we're going to do whatever for society's sake, that's not loving your enemies. That's capitulating.
In the United States, throughout our history, there have been periods of revival. Has there been anything like that in Canada?
Oh yeah, there has been. There has been some history of that too, as there has been across the Western world. Will that come again? I don't know. I hope so.
In the course of that,
I'm not going to count on it, but I hope so.
Didn't some of those spiritual awakenings come with preachers that just flat out called the sin out? Didn't cover over, gloss over anything, just let them have it. And I'm sure they would have advised today, you can't talk to people like that, but maybe that's the problem. I know.
We've hidden behind this curtain that society has drawn actually over us, and we're not willing to peek out of it. But you're right. Those revivals came with people who were willing to stand up, and not just the preachers, but the people in the pews too, who are willing to say, okay, here's where I stand. Now, if you ask, where do you stand? People, shuffle around and they look for some place to run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In events like in the United States, 9/11 and the shooting man in, or actually it's probably more than one guy out there in Vegas, are these false flags or are these gigantic sacrifices to some demon god?
I don't know either which way that goes. Is it evil? Yeah, absolutely. Could there be a false flag side to it? Yep, there may very well be. I'm very well aware of the arguments that have been made that way. But here's the thing, Daniel. I don't have evidence. I don't have solid proof of anything. So typically, I don't go where I don't have that hard nail down, the hard nail down facts. Mm-hmm. But in terms of false flag, it could certainly be the case. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. It did happen. Mm-hmm. Now, how it's spun and maybe the reasons why it happened, that could be different than what the narrative is being given to us. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't have answers for that. Mm-hmm. But there's a history. There is a history of some pretty shady stuff.
I don't have any problem making wild-eyed claims based on nothing. Carl, it sounds like I need to empower you to do some of that. It's really kind of fun. For instance, I'm trying to start a rumor in my Facebook feed that the Earth is actually a triangle. Well, yeah. I mean, some people claim it's flat. Other people say it's a cube. But I'm telling you, it's a triangle, and so I'm trying to start that now.
That's interesting. That'd be fun. That would be a fun one.
Tell me something about Canada life there, man. You guys got free healthcare up there, or what?
No, it costs us through our taxes an awful lot, an awful lot.
Would you guys mind going on Obamacare if we send you guys some Obamacare up there? Would you guys like to enroll in that?
Can we send you some carbon tax? Get that here. We'll do a trade up.
Wow, man, that sounds like an interesting trade right there. So it sounds like both of our countries are pretty well messed up.
Yep, I think you're right. I think that's the story of the Western world right now.
And see, that's crazy too, because I was planning for my escape when it all breaks down here in the States. I was planning on getting across the border, but really, I'm kind of scared about them Mountie dudes, them mounted police with a big, tall, furry looking hats. That's some creepy stuff. That kind of reminds me of It. The movie. I don't know. Have you ever had to face them people down?
I have good friends who are in the RC. I have friends who are in the RCMP, and I've rubbed shoulders with the RCMP a number of times. I mean, they're like anybody else. They're just folks doing their job, and the whole idea of riding on horses and the big hats, the whole bit. That's the ceremonial side. They're typically in their squad cars with the Kevlar.
As we get toward, I also want to get this question here. You guys have any big feet up there?
I've got a buddy with size 12.
Oh, that's the way it is, eh? All right, here, let me fix this here. All right, well, Carl, we're getting near the end of the broadcast. What anything you like to say about your blog or your book or your upcoming book?
Right now, my website is not up. We had a website going for a while when I had our magazine, Forcing Change. We're going to be reopening the website, Lord willing, sometime before the book is launched. But we're working on a book, and that's right now all of my focus and attention is on this book. It's called Game of Gods, The Temple of Man in the Age of Reenchantment. Mm-hmm. And I'm just hoping that within the next 4 to 6 months it'll come out, and we're hoping that it's going to make an impact.
Well, some of the paganism is enchantment.
Facebook. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter, though.
Okay. And is that where the updates are?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, Carl Teichert, I appreciate you coming back on the Edge Television broadcast. How do you like the interview?
Hey, it was fun.
Okay.
I especially like talking about what we can do to swap from one country to another. You can take our carbon tax. We'll take Obamacare. There we go.
Hey, there you go. We can solve world problems. Next time you're on, we'll solve world hunger. How about that?
Hey, thanks for the interview.
All right, sir. Thanks for coming on. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That was Carl Teichert here on the Edge Television broadcast with his upcoming book, Game of Gods, The Temple of Man in the Age of Reenactment. Of course, I would say this is more like the age of Freaksville, man, because it is getting really freaky out there. What's behind all that freakiness going on in this country particularly? Obviously, Carl says a bunch of naked people running around at the Burning Man, and you got naked people running in the streets. You've got You got Obama. He's still out there. He's not going away. Then you got Hillary Clinton. Who knows what kind of incantation that old witch is doing. She's probably trying to cast some kind of curse on Trump right now, because everybody says she's a witch anyway, riding on a broomstick, coming down in there, trying to cast spells, trying to get herself back in the presidency. I wonder if there's any way we can have like a reflector, man. When she starts sending them curses toward Trump, we have like a reflector in it and just hit her right back, and then whatever. And that's what I've heard people say, that whatever curse somebody puts on somebody, you're supposed to kind of reverse it and send it back the other way, like 10 times worse. Next week, we're going to have with us Kelly Lee and Michael Brodsky. It's going to be an awesome Halloween program on the Edge television broadcast. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Be sure to stop by next week to watch the program. This show will be edited and then put it into the main player there in the center of the Edge's website. Additionally, we'll podcast it, and we'll put it into our TuneIn Radio playlist. That TuneIn Radio playlist plays all of our programming one after the other, 24 hours a day, so you can go anywhere with that. L.A. Marzulli will be back with the elongated skulls and the secrets of Fatima. Always something going on with the Catholics over. What is it with the Catholics, man? There was some talk about voodoo. Man, they're always doing some kind of voodoo. Catholics. Did somebody just call them a cult? Was the mainline preacher just called them a cult in the last couple of days or so? Anyway, also we're going to have Jonathan Gray coming back on the program talking about ancient technology. What did they have back then? How did they make the pyramids? We're going to find out. Well, thank you everyone in the live chat for being a part of this program. If we haven't had a guest on the show you'd like to see, drop me a line at edgeam@yahoo.com. Don't forget to click on the Legacy Food to prepare food insurance there. And if you'd like to contribute to the Edge, just click on the PayPal as well. Don't say much about those things, because this isn't the way we roll here at the Edge television broadcast. Daniel Ott for the Edge. Bye-bye.